Hello, and welcome back to Still Unbelievable. I'm your host, Andrew Knight, and with me today is my usual host from over at Ask an Atheist Anything, Matthew Taylor. Hey, Matthew, how you doing?
I'm groovy. You right?
Yeah, I am right and ready for this episode.
It's going to be good.
It is. So, do you want to introduce our other guest?
Of course, yes. Our other guest is the lovely Jane here to talk about one of the past unbelievable shows. Hello, Jane.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. So, you were saying that we are here to talk about a recent unbelievable episode, and that unbelievable episode was how should the church respond to transgender? That episode was on March 16th, 2019, and the participants in that show were Peter Linus and Jenny Ann Bishop. So, Matthew, we were saying in the run-up to this show that the they never actually answered that question on Unbelievable. How should the church respond to and I don't know what they even mean by respond to transgender anything, right? Follow that with any other word, and it still seems odd to me. How should the church respond? As if there's as if we should plan some way to treat people, and that seems very strange to me. But do you have any opening thoughts? And Jane, do you have any opening thoughts as we start to peel back what it means for the church to have a response to the transgender community?
It does. It kind of throws in mind the idea of this is a problem, or dare I say, a disease, and they need to work out a way to respond to it. But I would suggest that actually it's more the other way around. Is the church is catching up with the rest of society, and their response should really be what the rest of society's response is.
Mm.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I mean, my initial thoughts are just treat them like a human being.
Yes.
Sounds obvious, doesn't it? But I think that's the problem. The church clearly don't know how to deal with this, but does it need lots of dealing with? That might be part of the question. I mean, this is something that's not new, is it? It's been going on for a long time. Maybe it's more in the we see a lot on TV, don't we? Trans people are perhaps more visible and less visible in other ways. But I think that the viewpoint should be just to be, I would say, generally be sympathetic and see what that person has to say. Maybe, as I always said to people, I've got enough friends. Get to know me. If you don't like me, that's fine.
Right. Why I don't require everyone in my community to like me, and if I did, I could require it, but I still wouldn't get what I was after, right? I mean, they still wouldn't. But in another way, I don't understand why the church has become so sensitized to the LGBTQI plus community, because in the past, and by the way, I hope is that correct now? Can I just say LGBTQ, or should I continue on? I mean, what sort of works here?
It's sort of hard to know how many extra letters we have now, isn't it? But back in my day, it was just LGB. There wasn't even a T part.
Right.
It seems to have expanded somewhat. I think it's taken into consideration all sexuality, gender identity, and now we have the non-binary thing as well, don't we? Which we have to take on board, and that's a whole other subject, I guess. But yeah, everybody in the LGBTQ plus, I think, will probably suffice.
So that works for me. I don't actually. This is another one of those things that I don't actually mind. If we have a community that sort of expands the way it's identified, right? So LGB, and then we've got LGBT, LGBTQ, LGBTQI, and LGBTQI. I don't actually mind that we're continuing to expand that definition. It seems to be one of those things that in my part of the world, the southeastern United States, people sort of ridicule that, right? Well, it used to be LGBT, and now it's LGBTQ and QI plus, or QIX, or whatever it is. And I don't actually mind.
I think
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's about being inclusive, isn't it? And it's, whether you're gay, straight, bisexual, transgender, non-binary, and I apologise if I've left anyone out, but I think it's about being inclusive to anyone who doesn't fit in that regular category, as because we've all got to be classified somehow, haven't we? It seems.
Right. In fact, I would be perfectly happy if it were LGBTQI XH and the H could be heterosexual, because honestly, I really don't think, I don't think any of us, regardless of how we categorize ourselves, in relation to, and I'll just say that the southeastern United States sees this as a sexual issue rather than a gender issue, right? And so that's part of the misunderstanding. But I don't think that even if we were trying to misidentify this as a sexual issue, we're not, none of us are that different from each other in the sense that we have things that drive us sexually. Although that's not the problem here, because the issues around LGBTQI plus are not primarily sexual issues, are they? Although they can be, but they're not primarily.
I mean, I was going to say that I think maybe this is a big part of the problem, is that we're talking about transgender, and the church seemed to perhaps sexualize it in a way, and perhaps that's the issue, because it's not about sexuality. You can be a trans man, a trans woman, and you can be gay, straight, bi, just the same as someone who isn't trans can be. So it's not related to that, is it? But I wonder if that's part of the problem with the church, that it's traditionally been this thing about, when you look at people that are gay, and this whole issue, hasn't it, about gay ministers, etc., and so, well, even female ministers, really, until recently. But I think that all that is intertwined, isn't it? And then you throw the trans thing in, and it really doesn't fit for them, does it?
Well, it doesn't. And maybe this is where we will end up right in the middle of the episode, because it doesn't, Matthew, I'm going to hand you the mic over this, because I think you've got some notes here. It doesn't fit for them, because the church, at least the conservative church in the past, I think, the Methodists just had a conference over this, and the Methodists are trying to be more progressive about LGBTQI plus issues, right? But in general, in the past, the church has been stuck on a binary gender identification for all of humanity.
Yeah, and I think the church has painted itself into a corner somewhat on this, because the Bible is their book, and from the very first pages of the Bible, you've got the human race broken down into male and female. And to those who, like myself, who were brought up in a very fundamentalist interpretation of the Bible, and a very literal interpretation of the Bible, that was it. And anything that challenges those very rigid boundaries creates a problem. And the church has got two choices, several choices actually. They could ignore it, they could embrace it, or they could do what a very unhelpful huge section of the church is doing, which is to fight it and to tackle it, and to point the finger at all those people and call them all sorts of unpleasant names. And that's the bit of the church which, to my own shame, I was once a part of. That's the bit of the church that's got all the problems. They're creating significant issues for themselves and for society by calling all these people who don't belong into those very rigid circles some quite horrible and despicable names. And when this is where we get to my notes and where we talk about choice and all that. And I think people who are in that mindset, they're so rigid and immoved in that mindset, they can't get. So I'm going to change that. People who are in that mindset actively refuse to engage with people who don't fit into those circles, whether they're trans or gay or any of the others, to understand their position. And they're pushing onto those people their own interpretation of their own holy book. And they're not putting any effort into understanding the position of those people that they're engaging with, which, if you look at other parts of the Bible, specifically the New Testament and around Jesus, the message there, and these are the same Christians who acknowledge that part of the Bible, it's all about Jesus going to people and meeting people where they are and meeting their needs where they are. And that isn't the church that I see quite often.
Yeah. Romans 127? So in my part of the world, in the southeast U.S., there tends to be an over-reduction of the LGBTQI plus community to just say that it's all just homosexuality run amok. And so there's almost no effort in this part of the world to separate gender from human sexuality. And more than that, there's no attempt to separate, of any, if they can't have sex one way, it's wrong, right? And this is long part of the Christian tradition. We go back to Romans 127, right? And the Apostle Paul is saying, homosexuals should be condemned. They should burn forever. And somehow Christianity has not managed to create any nuance for itself in the intervening period. And Matthew, you pointed out that, from the first two chapters of Genesis onward, right? Christianity has had this sort of broken understanding about human gender. And that broken understanding about human gender leads to all of the other problems that Christianity has in regard to gender and human sexuality.
And we see this played out in the church and public, because we've got quite a famous evangelist in this country called Steve Chalk. I've been to see him preach a number of times years ago, and he came out a couple of years ago as gay affirming, and he said in his church he will quite happily hold a gay marriage. And he was a member of the Evangelical Alliance, which is quite a large body in the UK of evangelical churches joined together. And they effectively kicked him out, if I understand right. I might have to double check my facts on that one, see that I'm actually telling the truth here. But my understanding is that he was kicked out of the Evangelical Alliance, or it was suggested that he leave the Evangelical Alliance because of that. And it's quite telling that it was Evangelical Alliance that sponsored this transformed document that formed this unbelievable episode.
Yeah, I mean, to give an example of how far the church are behind, even in the UK, I mean, it was only last year I walked a gay friend of mine down the aisle because he asked me to, and it took him 5 years to get the agreement, and it was the first full church religious wedding in a church in that borough, and that was Merton, so Wimbledon it was, and it took them 5 years to get agreement to do that. I mean, it sounds crazy, doesn't it, when you think about it? And so it shows you how far, I guess, the church has to catch up with all of this. Andrew, it sounds like it's might be worse where you are. I don't know. It sounds a bit like that, but I like to think of the UK as quite progressive, but I do wonder if the church really are.
It's the U.S. is in quite a turbulent period right now, and without bashing our glorious leader, who deserves lots of bashing, but we don't have time to do that justice, right? We can Heil Trump, but fortunately,
this is what happens when you put straight people in power.
Yeah, well, look,
obviously,
I'm not sure that dude's. No, that'll be black helicopters landing on my lawn if I have to. I really, we made a lot of progress prior to 2016. The Supreme Court in, was it April 2014 or April 2015, finally passed a law accepting non-binary, well, at least accepting homosexual marriage in the United States, right? So two men or two women. Now, I don't think that goes far enough, okay? But we did get that far, right? We got far enough to allow any marriage of any two people, regardless of their gender, but it's still sort of presumed a binary gender. And that took, it took, well, until I think April 2015, right? So we are that far. But in the intervening period, we've had county magistrates who have absolutely refused to sign marriage licenses for people out of the LGBTQI plus community. And so we are absolutely broken over this issue, Jane. Maybe you can tell me what it means that they had to, or that your friend had to work for 5 years to get agreement. Because in the United States, we don't sort of have that. It was a law, right? And there was no sort of working toward agreement. So what does that mean that your friend had to work for 5 years to get agreement to have the ceremony? Was that separate from the legal landscape? Tell me about that story.
Okay. Well, gay marriage has been legalised in the UK for quite a long time now. I think it's a decade or so. I don't know. But
well, it's not really marriage, was it? They had this compromise position, didn't they? Was it civil partnership rather than marriage?
But then they changed it to marriage, wasn't it? Was it about 5 years ago or so?
Something like that, yeah. But it was civil partnerships beforehand, wasn't it? Which was a bit of a strange scenario.
Yeah, it's like you can have the same rights to be married, but you can't have that sacred marriage thing.
I know, it was most odd, wasn't it?
Because I remember I had a lesbian friend of mine got married about 5-6 years ago. And of course, when that changed, then friends I had that were gay that wanted to get married got married. But my friend, well, his husband, he's a very keen churchgoer, more keen than my friend is really. Although they're both my friends, of course. But he'd been at that church, going every Sunday, working in the community. He was a mentor to a lot of lost souls, should we say, teenage lads and so on. And he really would help them out. And they had a number of properties, and they would, if somebody couldn't fit in, they would help them fit in and so on, and help them get on with their lives. And he'd been going to that church and working, really doing things in the church for 15 years. And so 10 years into this, when the law changed, he asked if they would like to get married, but because he believes in God, he would like the full ceremony. And it took 5 years to get agreement because people objected. It's hard to understand what people were objecting about, really. But what was clear, and this is what I thought was so fantastic about it, is that my friend said, look, if we're going to do it, we want to do it properly. We want the rainbow balloons, rainbow flags, and there's no holding back with this. And there really wasn't. And it was the most incredible wedding I've ever been to. It was an honour for me, really, walking my friend down there, 300 people. It was fantastic. But isn't it incredible that, given that the law was changed 5 years ago, but churches in the UK can still object to, I think it's United Reformed Church, what it was, which I guess is probably a bit more liberal than some. But
yeah, they do tend to be, I think.
It's but it just struck me as really shocking that they would say, no, we're not happy about doing that. The minister, they call him a minister, don't they, rather than a vicar, I think, objected to it originally, but he turned around what he was going to do, and he agreed to do it, and he did the most incredible speech. And it was really, it was like, it felt like we were changing the world again, yeah, back to my uni days. But I think that it just shows you how far it is behind. Because to me, it was just really shocking. These are my friends. They've been together over 20 years.
Right.
It's amazing, isn't it? How the church. The biggest problem with the church is that I think that anyone in the LGBTQI plus community will feel oppressed by the church, because the church serves to, only has that, man, woman, get married thing and nothing else. And so they have to, I think, change. And I think this is a lot to why people are disgruntled with the church in the UK. It's not as in America. I understand. Don't you have to believe in God to be a senator or be in the Senate? But here it's not like that. We're a bit more relaxed about such things, but not as much as you might think when it really gets down to it.
Let me take on two of those points. It is true in the United States. It is not a law in the United States that you have to believe in God in order to hold some public office. However, it is de facto required, because most people in the United States still profess Christianity. In a Pew Research poll, was quite clear that atheists are the least trusted social class in the United States. I don't know why that is, but so it's not a law that if I were running for office.
But it might as well be, Andrew.
That's right. No, so so I'm in absolute agreement that if I wanted to run for public office, not that people should vote for me for plenty of other reasons, but being an atheist would disqualify me.
Yeah.
And
you'd lose so many votes, you'd be tempted to keep it quiet.
Yeah, that's right. And then the other bit of this is, you were telling the story about the preacher. I don't know his name, but the one that performed the ceremony for your friend.
Mm-hmm.
He changed his mind, from not being willing to perform the ceremony at some point to being willing to perform the ceremony. And I was wondering if you knew what caused his change of heart. Did you ever talk about it with your friend or with him, so that you know? Because it seems to me that is a really important lesson in this show, right? Because we're trying to answer how the church should respond to.
I think it probably, Andrew. I'm trying to remember. There's a big story to all of this. Of course, it's one of my best friend I've known 20 years.
Right.
And I think the thing is that I guess he didn't really. He was worried about what the congregation would think. There were people who said, "Well, we're not sure about this," and people. It's a very conservative area, and if you ever go to somewhere like Wimbledon, southwest London, it's quite wealthy, it's quite affluent, very conservative. So I think that's a huge factor. And I guess as a minister of the church, you don't want to offend your congregation, but I think you should challenge them. I think really probably what changed his mind more than anything was that my friend, who doesn't really believe in God, but his partner does, went to the church, and I think helped him really to break those barriers down. And eventually they got there, and rightly so, I think. But I suppose the key thing here is a bit like Matthew said earlier. How he felt towards people that were gay. His mindset changed on that. We can all learn something, can't we? I mean, I grew up in a very sort of conservative, very white, sort of lower middle class suburban part of London, and there weren't many people who were black. It was quite racist. It was certainly homophobic in the 1980s when I was a teenager. And you've got all those things, and I think that I was perhaps probably like that then, and I'm not proud of it, but we can learn, can't we? And that's the point of something like this, is that to try and help people to realise that, we've not got some mental health problem, we're not misfits in society. We are part of society, and we exist. And for the church, they should embrace that, surely.
Yeah, I agree. I grew up in the southeast United States. In fact, I grew up in the state of Alabama, and I was just thinking to myself, you'd have felt right at home as a young person in Alabama, because we were bigoted and racist and intolerant and self-righteous, and And that part of the country largely still is.
I mean, I think we all have to. There are always those people, aren't there, really, Andrew and Matthew, that won't change, and you can't sway them. They'll always have this, even if they know they're wrong, they're right, aren't they?
Yeah.
We have to have the hope in people that attitudes have changed, and I think they have. If we look at, I suppose, coming back to the whole transgender thing, that if I transitioned, getting off 25 years ago now, it was quite different then. People weren't talking about it. In fact, transgender was a word that didn't exist. It was transsexual back then, and people didn't really know what that was. And all they would say is something, oh, what, you can have a sex change then, and that's how it was. And it's really, it's hard to be more offensive, really, isn't it? So I think people wouldn't accept talk like that today, but that's what I faced. And of course, nobody understood. I had to educate a health authority. I had a social worker because I tried to take my life. And I think that I had to educate her, and I did. And then I went to see a psychiatrist because I thought, well, if I take an overdose, I'll see one, won't I? Which worked quite well. But the psychiatrist just said, well, this isn't something I know about, despite it being in the Diagnostic Statistics Manual 4, as it was then,
right,
which is where you've got all the mental health problems, and gender dysphoria was a mental health problem. I'm not really sure whether it's still classified as that now, but it certainly does become a mental health problem for you at the time, or it did for me. And I think that I had to do a lot of educating, and it's quite hard, isn't it, really, because I was really using my own experiences and my own thoughts to try and explain what it was to people, because I hadn't really met loads of other people in the same situation. Not really. So quite a difficult scenario, whereas 25 years on, it's out there, isn't it? And people are talking about it. And there's a part of me that kind of thinks that's really important, it's really good. And there's a part of me that goes, oh, just trying to get on with my life now, So, but when we look at all of those things, there is a change in how the public look at it. I think they're a lot less freaked out now than, I don't know if that's the right term, but it was certainly being the right term back then. I had got quite a lot of abuse, really. And I suppose that's a whole huge subject, but I don't want to sort of get lost in my own thoughts, really.
Well, first, thanks for sharing that part of your story, because I actually have sitting here on my office desk a copy of the DSM-4 text revision 99. And yeah, gender dysphoria. I don't know about the DSM-5.
I don't know.
I should look it up because it's an interesting part of this conversation. But it is nice that more people are able to express themselves now. But I think the reason that we might have some confusion, maybe part of the reason that your psychiatrist was had to say to you, I'm just not familiar with this, is because we lived in a society, and at least in some places still live in a society, where people are not free to express themselves as the gender that they feel like they are. And I'm sorry, you go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just thinking. I think it becomes. I think one of this is perhaps touching on that question that Matthew said of a Christian lady who says, I don't get it. Why would someone choose to go through a major operation like that? Well, because you haven't got a choice. It's that or die, really. So, I mean, this is the thing about all of that, is that your gender identity is your core identity, isn't it? And for me, it just became so distressing as I grew towards adulthood that I just couldn't cope, and it was just ruining my life. And even my mum tried to get me sectioned in a hospital, saying I was mentally ill. It's but I wasn't really mentally ill, was I? I just couldn't deal with trying to think I'd have to live my life as someone who I wasn't. It was just too painful and inconceivable that I would have to go through that, and I'd really rather not be alive. And and I did try to kill myself. But although perhaps I didn't do too good a job of it, obviously, but I did it to get help, really. I did it to say, look, I'm not messing about. Someone listened to me. Because nobody was listening to me, I managed to come out and express what I was and who I was. And people listened a bit. Then I got bored of it. But of course, it didn't really change anything for me. So it becomes that fundamental. It's like my friend, my good friend I walked down the aisle, he said, well, why would anyone choose to be gay? It's not a choice, is it? Because
No,
all
I
you're
think
doing
that's a
is
very
making
good
your
point.
life, you're making your life crap, aren't you? You're making it hard. It's a lot easier to be heterosexual, isn't it? I reckon,
Absolutely.
anyway.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a lot
Yes.
easier to just say, well, yeah, okay, well, I might think, I'm a woman, but no, and just not go through all of that, because it's not an easy thing to go through, and nobody in their right mind would put themselves through it if they had an option to do something else, would they, and not put themselves through it. And I think that's the essence of it. It kind of felt like me. It was like, as a child, I didn't really understand. I was just a child. People didn't say, well, Jane, well, but people pointed things out all the time through my childhood that, weren't normal, whatever that was.
Right.
And, I wasn't one of the boys, and I wasn't, and it just, I got relentlessly bullied to the point of just being terrified. And my mum used to have to walk the dog and to stop me getting beaten up on the way home from school in primary school. And secondary school wasn't a lot better. And I've still got chipped teeth from where I've been kicked in the mouth, because I'm afraid that's what people do, because people don't understand, and I didn't really understand. I didn't have anyone to help me. When I was 15, I phoned the Samaritans, and they said to me, well, don't expect to find anyone else like you around, which wasn't particularly helpful, when you're 15 and it's 1986 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah? So that's the problem. So you're just desperate, aren't you, to try to get help, and I had to look to the gay community, where it was a very strange place, but thankfully it did help me realise I wasn't alone, because I really did feel that I was, and I thought it's just something wrong with me. I cannot cope with this, and lots of things happened. I don't want it to turn into a biopic, really. But do you see what I mean, though, from what I'm saying? It was so hard. Looking back at it, I sort of wonder how I got through, really, but I did somehow.
I think that was a key moment for me, actually. I mean, there were multiple key moments in me changing my attitude, and my attitude softened, which made exiting Christianity, which is a whole different story in itself, slightly easier. But I did find that the action of exiting Christianity helped me to dump the shackles of these biblical, what's the word I'm looking for? These biblical rules and laws that one must live by. And once I dumped those, I found the acceptance and the understanding came much more easily. And I think my experience is there are two types of Christians on this subject. There are those who are in the rigid, that I've already made reference to before. They are on the rigid male and female, and thou shalt not do anything different. And there are those who are trying to understand that it's not a choice. And I think, well, I'm gonna rephrase that. My personal experience is my particular brand of Christianity hindered my understanding of getting that it was not a choice, and that people who find themselves in a what's the word I'm looking for, non-straight scenario, regardless of what it is, they're not doing that out of choice. That is how they are. And I think it was later on when I got a better understanding of the science and then the genetics, and where that's now spreading out, and that knowledge we're now getting more and more of. And I think that is helping hugely, and that certainly helped me an awful lot. But I have a problem with it is a choice brigade, because I've had this conversation with multiple Christians on forums, and my wife sometimes says to me, "Why do you bother?" And I'll say, because at some point they're going to get it, and if I'm one of those steps, eventually they'll get it. But to try to get through, when did you choose to be straight? Well, straight's the default. Okay, no, you are straight. You didn't choose. That's how you are. Somebody who is gay didn't go from straight to being gay. That is how they are. Can you imagine? And I've tried to use quite explicit explanations to these people. Put this mental image in your head, and I've tried to choose a mental image that wouldn't suit their sexuality, just to try to get the point across, and it just doesn't seem to work. And I think those are the people that we need to somehow get on board, because I think the Christians who want to understand, this Christian lady that I mentioned in the email chains, she absolutely wants to get it. She really does, but she's straight, she's heterosexual, has been all her life, and she can't enter in her mind why someone. In fact, she even said to me one time, she turned around and said to me one time, "Why can't they just choose to be gay?" And I said, my response was, "But they're not gay. That's the point."
Yeah, that's a really good point, isn't it? But I mean, people. This is the same thing of that. This LGBT lumping everything in together, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I'm not gay. I've been with my partner who's a man for 17 years, so quite a long time. And I think that people just because I think the reason I can't just be gay is because I'm not gay.
Yeah, quite. It's that sample, isn't it?
It really is. And actually, I would say that it wasn't until I was starting to transition, really, or perhaps when I was going to places and sort of trying to be myself, that was the first time I had an encounter with a man, because I couldn't do it if people thought I was a man. Do you see what I just couldn't do that.
Yes, you weren't a man attracted to men. You were a woman attracted to men. And in the same way, this Christian that Matthew has referred to, and I actually know this person, I accept that this person is well-intentioned. I think what I would ask that person to do is just say, well, imagine if you were trapped, because I know this woman is heterosexual, right? So imagine if you were a man, you feel like you're a woman, and that's who you are now. Wouldn't you go through a surgery to be who you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of it. I mean, I've talked about sort of the pain of it before transition and so on, and it's going through that transition is incredibly hard. I always say I have a friend who surprised me, actually, a friend of my fiance, who surprised us and said, I'm transitioning, and I had no idea. And so I felt like I'd got the other side of it then, because I'd known this friend for 15 years. And it was quite interesting, that for me. I mean, I got into it straight away, and it's been fine, actually. But I think what I was going to say is that, coming back to that thing, although the transition stuff's hard, I mean, when I look back now, having post-transition nearly 25 years, in terms of going through all the surgery stuff for 20 years, I think life's so much better now. Yeah. And I can't believe what I've achieved. And some of those things, I've had to fight sexism. I've had to fight transphobia, I suppose, going back. More sexism now, really, and which is arguably equally frustrating. But I think that's the thing, isn't it? My life's so much better. And I'm also, this thing people will always say is that, to contribute to society. I'm a professional. I went on to get a couple of degrees, and I do contribute to society, and I do contribute to my community and so forth. And it's better to do that than be some kind of wreck where you just hate yourself and you can't do anything. And, I probably wouldn't be alive, I think. So, yeah.
I want to underline that again for the listeners, because the nature of Still Unbelievable is that we have Christian listeners that cross over from the show Unbelievable, right, from Justin Priley's show. And I just want to say again, if you are in a church that thinks that healing is not allowing people to transition, to to try to get people or force people to identify with whatever macro gender characteristics they were born with. If you think you can heal people that way, here's the story. You're hearing the story right now that puts the lie to that. Healing and what the church should do to respond. How should the church respond to the transgender? The church should respond to the transgender community the same way it responds to any community. Allow people to heal. And if you are standing in the way of that, you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? Because, of course, before I went through all that stuff, I tried everything, didn't I, not to do it, to try and find a way to be happy or to be, that I wanted to be around and be alive. And,
Sure.
I went out with lots of girls and tried all that and didn't really like it. I tried to be a man. I tried to, put myself in really masculine situations, and it generally ended in tears. But I really tried. I really tried.
That's such an important part of what the thing that's hitting me hardest, right? The thing that I hear the most out of your story is you don't go. It's not as if you go through a gender reassignment surgery cavalierly, or without some consideration.
Hardly.
Right?
No.
This is the thing you do when you're at the end of your rope. This is the thing where you have tried everything else, and even if someone else can't understand that, and I come from a part of the world where people don't understand. We are professionals at not understanding things. We've turned that into a fine art form, not understanding. But if this is you've done everything you can do, and this is the thing that did allow you to live the life that you wanted. And it doesn't matter a tinker's damn whether somebody else understands it or not, because it's not their understanding that gives you your life.
I think yes, that's true. And I think another thing, that there's a lot of focus on the gender reassignment, the surgery and that. But actually, it's just, for me, I was just so keen to get that through that, because I just wanted to get on with my life, put it behind me,
Right.
as if I ever could. But really, that was the thing, because, I've been living, as a woman in a female role, for 4 years. So before I got to the point of going through surgery, and I went through the NHS, and it takes ages, and they are really bad at being quite indifferent, and you have to be pretty. It's all, I don't know if desperate's the right word, but perhaps it is, to go through the gender identity clinic on the NHS. It's pretty tough going. I didn't just write a check and go and jump on the plane to Belgium or somewhere and do it there. I went through the NHS, and I did it the hard way, really. But I think a lot of emphasis, like Matthew's friend says, why would someone choose to go through a major operation like that? Seems to be a lot of focus on the operation, doesn't there? Whereas, really what's in your pants or your knickers, it's not relevant to most people most of the time, is it? So there's a huge emphasis on that when you think that, but of course, it is something that you remain very unhappy about, but this is always the last thing you do, isn't it, really? Because it's just how it seems to work like that. But yeah, I think the emphasis for me was, once that happened, then it was just a sense of relief, really. And I just wanted to get on, and, it wasn't really necessarily, and somebody will say this, I'm sure, it's all about, you just want to have sex, don't you? And I said, well, no, it's not that. I was quite interested in that because I hadn't done it, so it was quite exciting, I suppose. But that's not what being a woman is about, is it? So it's a part of it, I suppose, but it's not the be all and end all. Much like if you're in a long-term relationship, it's not all about lust, it's about love, isn't it? And all of that. So I think people tend to sort of focus on certain aspects of being transgendered all that. Whereas it's really the day-to-day experience, isn't it? And being treated as you feel you are. I get treated as a woman. I'm a woman. That's what happens, and it's what I expect at the very least, and it's generally what I get. So there's no problem with that. But that makes me feel comfortable in myself, and that's to a point what it's about.
Right. When we try to reduce each other to one aspect of human experience, to just human sexuality or whatever, we are missing the point of the human experience. We're only focusing on the sexual experience. And look, Christians have good reason to have this problem. The God of the Bible is a person that cares an awful lot about what people do in their bedrooms, right? And so I sort of get how they're so focused on that particular issue. This God of the Bible really cares about what people do with their genitalia. But I see no really good reason why I should. I don't care what the stories are, and even heterosexual people want to conduct their sexual lives in private, right? So
hopefully, yeah.
Yeah. So why would we force anyone? I don't care what their sexual preference is. Why do we want? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just thinking that is it the thing with you say you're gay and something, or transgender, because it seems to be just lumped in with the whole sexuality thing, that you kind of wantonly displaying your sexuality by making a statement like that, or if you present as transgender, and if you're early in the transition, and don't forget there's loads of transgender people that people in the church have met and didn't even realise. So there is that aspect to it as well, isn't there? But it's like a flamboyant, wanton display of your sexuality by being that, Yeah. Is that part of it?
Matthew, what do you think?
Several things. I'm trying to organise several trains running through my head at the moment. There's one thing that does slightly perplex me in all this, because there are clearly people in the LGBT community who maintain a Christian faith and are attracted to Christianity and go to churches. I don't think all of those people will be going to churches which are openly accepting of them. So what is it about Christianity that is attractive to those people? Because I've been in a strand of Christianity which is arguably openly hostile to everybody who's in that community, and so I'm struggling to see what the attraction is to Christianity for those people. And I guess it's a testament to the strength of belief, and my experience with online conversations, and admittedly the people you meet online tend to be the more shouty types, so they're not necessarily the best cross section, but my experience of trying to have, and I do try to have these conversations when I have them with Christians online, I do try to have them in as sensible and as rational way as possible, is that these conversations do not end up sensible and rational. I get a very jaded and possibly disproportionate view of the sharp end of Christianity. So I'm just struggling to see the attraction. And to take it back to the Evangelical Alliance, who we've bashed a little bit already, and I've just looked up. I was right about Steve Chalk leaving Christian. I don't know if he was kicked out of the Evangelical Alliance, but he did leave the Evangelical Alliance. And the statement that I'm just looking at online from about 6 years ago of them, is that their stand, and they're a large organisation, their stand is not the stand that Steve Chalk took. It's, it is their stand is that Steve Chalk was wrong. Okay, I'm reading text that was 6 years old. I don't know, but judging by the document that we were talking about on this Unbelievable episode, their stance hasn't changed, and they represent a huge body of the Christians in the UK, and these are people who aren't all at the far edge of Christianity that I was in. These are people who are slightly more liberal, but they still are. So my problem is, why do people who are LGBT still stay attracted to Christianity, and why is Christianity trying to make themselves attractive to a group of people who they demonize?
It's a good question, perhaps a hard one to answer, I think. I suppose there are those that, when you said it initially, I thought, well, people just think, no, I'm going to go there because I'm gay, they'll hate that, and I'm going to go to church and pray, worship and all that. But of course, it's not that, is it? But I think for my friend, I think the problem is, like I talked about, my friend's getting married, and my friend he's very religious. He's always gone to church. It's a big part of his life, and he's very involved. I think that's it, and I think that he sort of just suffered being gay but not talking about it, because otherwise it was okay. Maybe a bit like some gay men before they come out, go out, they go with all the lads to have a really good laugh. If they're not if they're not sort of being offensive about other people that are gay, then it's probably all right, that kind of thing. Is that a part of it where they just want to fit in? It's a big part of their life, like my friend who still is very committed to the church, and he's very proud, very proud out gay man with his husband, everybody knows. And I don't think it was any secret, but I think these things are that people don't talk about it, do they? Or really, they don't accept it. And I think it is. I see what you're saying, Matthew. Though it's hard to fathom why anyone would want to put up with that, isn't it? Really, I mean, but maybe it's about the deep-seated belief is really important as well, and they just suffer it.
Yeah, I think it is a testament to how hard it is to shake this kind of belief. And I should know my exit from Christianity was long, drawn out, and painful, and that was without all the social stigma that Christianity would shove on other people.
In my part of the world, it would be very unusual to easily find a church that accepts LGBTQI plus Christians. So in my part of the world, the Baptist, the conservative evangelicals like the Church of God, Assembly of God, the Methodist churches tend to be conservative. You might find the Catholic churches. You would find Catholic churches around here. They would be equally conservative, and Church of Christ, that sort of thing. And so in this part of the world, I can understand why someone in the LGBTQI plus community who has a deep-seated faith fights to go to these churches, because there aren't any churches that are friendly to them. And the church is actually forcing them to fight two fights: a fight for who they are, a fight for their humanity. And after fighting that fight, if they're accepted, then they have to fight their fight for their own faith, because even if the church sort of hand waves away the fact that they're part of the LGBTQI plus community in order to give them a spot in the pews, they still rarely openly accept them. It is hard to find that church in the Southeast United States. And so I don't know why all people do it, but I can understand why some of them do, because that's the only thing open to them. So how should the church respond to the transgender community? Quit being hateful and obnoxious. Accept people for who they are.
but if you think about it, it's just another form of suppression, oppression, isn't it? That let's think of the gay guy that works on a building site. Yeah, let's dive
Yeah.
into cliches here, and they're all eyeing up all the women. Generally the buildings. I've been on building sites jobs, long time ago, and it's horrific, really. And I think the thing is that so they sort of try to fit in, and actually the thing is, of course, you can be gay, and if you don't tell someone and you don't go around kissing, or if you're a gay man, you don't go around kissing all the gay men, or if you're a woman, then they're not going to know, are they? So it's kind of easy, isn't it, to go a bit incognito and to suppress yourself a bit, which is probably what's happening here. But actually, if you look at the trans thing, well, you could be a beautiful trans woman or a handsome trans man, couldn't you? And nobody would know. Okay. But I think, and although that can happen, I'm not putting myself in that category of all of that, but there are people who, the problem is with the whole trans thing that shocks people. I mean, I was actually at school today, and I noticed there was a trans student, but it was really obvious, and I really felt for her. And I've never seen that. It's just the first time I've encountered that. No, it was work. That student was nothing to do with me, but I just noticed, and I thought, well, everybody's going to notice. I thought that's pretty impressive, because it must be scary. But then I thought, well, I suppose I've been there back in my day. These days I don't really have to worry too much. It's fine. People just accept me for who I am. But I think the thing is, of course, that you could have someone, a trans woman that nobody knows is trans, and it's fine, isn't it? And I mean, I can do that for the most part, but when the problem is, of course, the hardest thing is when you're most fragile is when you're through that transition period, which takes years, So there's lots to do, isn't there? Hormones take ages, hair removal, all that stuff. So I think, and also lots of things you have to sort of learn as well. Just because you're a woman doesn't mean all the intricacies if you haven't had the same depth of being a girl, like your sisters or something. So there's a lot of mannerisms and etiquette and all that, because etiquette is everything, isn't it, with gender? How we identify people, how people react. If a man comes up to me and a friend of mine in a bar, he'll give me a kiss on the cheek, but he won't do that to my other half because he's a man. Do you see what I mean? So there's all these obvious stuff. But I suppose the problem is that, I'll try and get to the point, is that you could be a gay man and you could be or a gay woman. Let's use a woman for a change. So you could be a gay woman, a lesbian, and you really believe in God, and you go to church and you just don't tell people you're a lesbian, and providing you haven't you don't look like a lesbian, whatever that is, then you'll be all right, won't you? But the trouble is, if you're transitioning, and I've got a friend that's transitioning from female to male at the moment, actually, which is just, I think people just find me out and come and find me and say, can I have some advice? But that's fine. But someone in that situation, you find it incredibly difficult, because you can't hide and you can't just pretend you're straight or something, or it's not the same as that, is it? Because it's visually obvious. And I think that's the bit that challenges people the most, because they can't go, oh, well, she's gay, but, we don't talk about it. She's all right, really. Whereas if you've got like a trans woman or a trans man who's at the point of not really that far through the transition, where they need people to be really supportive, for me, decades down the line, I don't really care that much. So, I've got over the thick skin. It's their problem many years ago. But, it's a really difficult time. And I think that what you're doing is basically saying, hi there, I'm trans, and if you go in a church like that, the chance of it going well are probably not good, are they? And that's when we want people to change and be more supportive.
Yeah, I think we're very good as a human race. No, good's not the wrong word. We're very bad at a human race of. I've gone and killed the sentence. I'll say no. I'll start. We're very good at drawing attention to what's visually different. That's That's the sentence I was trying to say. I've got a family member who's got a deformity. And it's quite easy. It's quite hard not to spot it. And so this person has that issue quite, especially around young children, because children stare, and then parents draw attention to the fact that the children's staring by saying, "Don't stare," and these we have a problem when it's something visual of making the situation worse by not knowing how to react, and then by making it obvious that we don't know how to act or that we're slightly uncomfortable, and we just draw attention to the fact that we're slightly uncomfortable. And we're as humans, we're awesome at that and not very good at making people comfortable, really, are we? And we don't need religion to do that. Let's give religion a bit of a breathing space for a minute. It's we don't need religion to show us up like that.
That's basically it, Matthew. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's like having a deformity almost, and then the problem becomes when people meet you at that point is how do they deal with you, and then. I remember a while ago I was in my work. I won't go into my work here, but I work with children, and I remember talking to this girl, and I wasn't sure I couldn't remember. She didn't obviously present as a girl or a boy, and it really freaked me out because I was trying to have this conversation, and I'm just trying to get in my head. This is the thing, isn't it? And then you get into all of that where people. When someone said, "Who's that?" and then, of course, you're into the pronoun territory now, and it really hurts when you're at that point, I think. And it was like being stabbed, really. I think, and the trouble is that the further you go on down the route where things get a bit better with that, the more it hurts, really, to a point. So it's quite hard, and then you just start to think that people are insensitive, and I've had friends of mine when I was at uni. I transitioned, and friends of mine I had a friend of mine crying because of this. She had a flatmate who was very religious, Methodist, I believe, and she said, "What you're doing is wrong," and she had a right go at me and that, and I just sort of stood there and sort of took it, and we were sitting in the kitchen in the uni halls, and she was sort of having a right sort of go about how what I was doing wrong and I wouldn't be saved and all this kind of thing. And I said, well, I'm not really that worried about it, really. But she sort of...
Awesome.
All the coolest people will be in hell anyway, so good company.
Exactly. So, yeah, exactly. We'll cool it down a bit. It's fine. But really, what shocked me was how... over that happened probably a couple of years into when I transitioned, and my friend, a good friend of mine, she was great, and she was crying, just saying, I can't believe that, you would put up with that. Why do you have to tolerate that? Why do you have to put up with that? And I said, well, unfortunately, people are ignorant, and unfortunately for this woman, it was her faith that kept her ignorant, which... it was a crying shame, and everybody was appalled by how she treated me. And let's face it, I'd done nothing to her. I hadn't gone in to have an argument. I was having a cup of coffee with my friend, and she lived in the same flat and came in to make some tea, and it went from there, really. But she felt she had to get a point across for some reason. Not that I asked her, of course, but I suppose really when we talk about those rigid people, like Matthew was saying about his particular faction he was in, that obviously her belief and her lack of understanding is reinforced by it's not necessarily a faith, is it? It's what she encounters when she goes to church, isn't it? And the people she has around her. But yeah, I didn't find it too bad, but I was more upset that my friend was upset, really.
It is one of those. It is one of those very strange things to me. It happens in my neighborhood on a regular basis. People feel completely comfortable coming to knock on my door, which is in some sense what this young lady did to you, right? She felt like she had a right to use her religious conviction to open up a conversation with you.
Yeah.
And I'm a computer programmer by trade. I don't use my trade as a way to go, oh, well, you don't have the right kind of computer. Although Matthew doesn't. Matthew's a Windows user, and okay, sorry. That's an inside joke, and maybe we should leave it. But
I don't know if that's the difference, does it? Are we two against one? Is that it?
oh, are you a Mac user? Oh,
Yes, I am. Yeah.
okay.
Oh no!
So,
Oh, dear.
Matthew, now
Flashback.
here's how it feels to be in a minority, bud.
There you go. What it feels like now, eh?
But it is a very strange thing that I can feel very convicted about things in my life. But if I'm religious, that is the thing, and I say this from having been religious in the past, right? That was the thing where I thought, well, I have a right to use my religion to sort of tell you off about something you're doing wrong, right? And so first, I'm sorry that she did that. And second, if you're listening to this, folks, and you want to know where the hurt lies, the hurt lies in being willing to weaponize your Christianity. That's where the church goes wrong with the transgender community. That's where the church goes wrong every time it does go wrong. Stop weaponizing religion.
I think, though, it comes down to this lack of understanding and really dogma, doesn't it? Really, which is let's face it, the church is famous for. The Bible, it's written, isn't it? And that's it. Whereas, science evolves, doesn't it? And we sometimes change our mind about things. But yeah, when I look back and think about it now, just, you made me think of that. I can picture it in my head now, but over 20 years ago, it really shocked me, and I just thought,
Sure.
what is this woman on? But why would you do that to someone you don't even really know? And I think this is what Matthew's. Let's call her a nice Christian lady who wants to understand. It's a matter of getting time to get to know someone. I mean, like I said earlier on, I spent my first couple of years going through transition really explaining, because people would ask me loads of questions when I was at uni, and I would, instead of, I had a friend, well, there was someone else there at uni at the same time who was going through the same thing, and they thought it'd be a good idea that we went and shared a flat, because I wanted to stay in Hills, and they said, no, that'd be too dangerous, I was like, okay, a bit disappointed. So I shared a flat with this other girl in this strange house with a Romanian woman it was, and she was very odd. It was in Wimbledon Park, so I'd say it was all very posh. And, but this other girl, this other woman, she went around with a chip over her shoulder saying, we don't know what it's like, you couldn't understand. And yeah, she had a point, to be fair, but it's no point sort of, I think there's no point taking that attitude, because, it soon became the case that people just didn't really like her that much. Whereas I just sort of took it on the chin and just said, well, just see if you can come up with a question someone hasn't asked me before.
Right.
And I just sort of took it on over a few drinks, or maybe quite a lot of drinks, because don't forget I was a 25-year-old student, and, booze was cheap in the bar. But And I took the time, and I think, I got to know some of the it girls in uni, which was quite fun, and I really just went for the people who were the main people socially that people looked up to, and had a chat with them, and they really helped me. So I think the thing is that it's okay to be ignorant, isn't it? But as long as you're not willfully ignorant, really, I think that you listen, and then maybe come away, with a different point of view. And I think this nice Christian lady who wants to understand, maybe that's what she needs, really, to then realise, well, it's not scary. We're not weirdos. We're not paedophiles. We're not.
One.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, there's a good one.
That drives me bonkers. That does, this.
I think that. Well, yeah. I mean, I think that when I transitioned, I think I can't swear this was the case, but I'm sure it was, that when I went off to work with, I'm a social worker and I work with children, so that she was horrified that they would let someone like me do that. And, what?
Right.
I don't get it. I don't get that link, but it's the same thing with gay men, isn't it? Being
it
paedophile.
is, yeah.
It's that same thing.
I don't know where it. Sorry, excuse my. Sorry. Oops, I'm gonna have to edit that out. Yeah, I don't know where that comes from, and that does seem to be a trait peculiar to the extreme fundamentalist Christians, where they're linking transgender and homosexuality with child abuse, and of course now it's all complicated now by the whole bathroom appropriate issue as well, and the justification that is and this whole issue is creating further justification to be nasty to people who are gay or transgender, and it drives me insane. I don't know how else to describe it. I don't think I'm even capable of rationally unpicking it, because it makes me so cross.
Yeah, I mean that thing about the whole bathroom thing. I mean, quite interesting. This, I think, I toured around the States in the late '90s before I'd gone through everything, and I used the ladies everywhere I went. Sorry about that, but it's
I'm
like
not good for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, President Trump, but you weren't president then. Was it Bill Clinton?
That's right.
Anyway, I think the thing is, yeah, I mean that's crazy, because I think, well, as soon as I transitioned to use the ladies, I didn't really worry about it. Went in and used it. All I was doing was using the loo, really. I mean, maybe adjusting my face or whatever, makeup and all that, as women do. But yeah, that's the only reason for going in there, really. So I don't really understand. And there's this thing, isn't there, in America about this sort of safe spaces. Well, I thought all the evidence pointed at. I don't think there's anyone really who's transgendered who's, well, I'm going to be transgendered so I can go and sexually assault women.
No.
Okay,
It's a bit weird, isn't it? I mean, I don't know. I mean, actually, well, you guys won't know this because you're men, aren't you? But the thing is that I always think, and it's like this, going to the loo. And I mean, generally, if I'm with friends, though, we all go in the loo, don't we? That's what women do. Sure. And then we have a chat, don't we? When we're sort of adjusting our hair and all that. And it's kind of just fun, isn't it? But there's nothing. I don't get why people would think there's anything untoward about any of it. It's just doing what other women do. It's just that's what we do, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't understand this. It is this whole dust up about public restrooms. I don't get the problem. In fact, I happen to know that there have been some small studies about who is least safe in public restrooms, and it is those people who are the ones who might be easily identified as belonging to the LGBTQI community.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is
but
those
you
people.
Could then,
Go ahead.
Well, Andrew, think of this then, right? Okay, so you've got some, and let's face it, the trouble is with all this transition stuff is that some people transition and seamlessly pass around society. Nobody knows. They get on with their life. It's fine, and I do that really, but for someone who's not so fortunate, can you imagine? So they're forced to go in the male restroom, as you'd say in America.
The men's room, yeah.
But the men's room as a woman, I mean, if there's a great way to get your teeth knocked out, that's probably it, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
So you'd be safe in the ladies, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Some of the listeners know that I'm visually impaired. And I can tell you that, so Jane, I haven't had your experience, but I have been in men's rooms where I have not been safe. As a man who looks like a man, there's nothing effeminate about me. I was an athlete, however, I do occasionally, in the wrong lighting conditions, present as visually impaired, because in the wrong lighting conditions, I'm blind as a bat. And I have been threatened in men's rooms in my country, in my hometown, in places close to my home where I should have been able to feel safe. And it wasn't because I was part of the LGBTQI plus community. It was just because I didn't see particularly well. And so I didn't navigate the room in a way. Oh man, I want to cuss so bad. I want us to lose our family friendly rating over this, and you have no idea the depth of feeling that I have here. But I have been threatened in a men's room, and it has nothing to do with. There's something about this restroom thing that just pushes people over the edge, and it is offensive. And I hope you've never had those experiences, because if you have, I'm really sorry.
I mean, I don't get why, because I mean, for me, the ladies is always a sanctuary, really, isn't it? It's the safest place to ever be, really. And I've never ever, certainly going in the ladies, never ever felt threatened. So and I haven't had to tolerate going into a men's room for decades, really. So I don't know, but I think. Yeah, and why so why would you put someone through that? It's just a way of encouraging prejudice, of marginalisation. So imagine this: you're transgender, and perhaps everybody realises that wherever you go, and you're going out shopping, but you've got to plan your trip so you don't need to use the restroom. Yeah. Well, what's that about, really? I mean, I just don't. This is the problem, isn't it? It's just another thing to push people to marginalise. A persecuted group. It's really easy, isn't it, to have a pop at the minority, isn't it? Let's face it, and that's what this is, isn't it?
I do plan. So I would have kept this secret unless you had said that. I didn't know this was coming, but I will tell you that because restaurants, particularly, tend to be dimly lit in the United States. It's part of the ambiance, right? The men's and women's rooms are also poorly lit, and even close to home, where most of the restaurants, the wait staff in the restaurants know me. I plan my eating out so that I can come home to the restroom, because they are not safe spaces for people who just don't look quite like everybody else.
That's crazy, isn't it? I mean, why'd you go there?
Well, we go. It's one of those things. It's like being part of the LGBTQI plus community and going to church. Because there just aren't many.
Is it just good food, or just want?
Right, because you just want to go out. You just don't.
Yeah. Okay.
And now I'll tell you that my girlfriend is actually very sensitive to this issue, and this has become more autobiographical than I intended. So I'll stop here. She's become pretty sensitive to this issue, and she, we try to go places where the restrooms are better lit, right? But if I'm in a poorly lit men's room, it's very possible that I'll run into somebody, or it's
people that but this is, I suppose, men, isn't it? Whereas where they get really upset by such minor indiscretions as they see it.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that weird? But I mean, I suppose coming back to all this stuff, I mean, where do we've talked about the nice Christian lady, haven't we, about her understanding and stuff, and this thing with the whole restroom thing, and the sort of it's a stigmatizing, it's an oppression of people who are LGBT in America, and and the church is a part of that for sure, and perhaps some of that is what drives it, or people use their religion, don't they, for their own agenda and so on, and again that drives the prejudice and the oppression and the bigotry and everything that goes with it, as we well know. But I suppose, in the UK, there's still a lot of that, and maybe that's why not so many people go to church. I mean, part of the reason I used to go to a Baptist church and a Methodist church every Sunday up to when I was 16. But I think for me, I felt that when I started to realise who I was and where I was at and struggling, it wasn't like I felt I could turn to the church for help, really, was it? So I felt very alone, and I think that it made me think about my whole faith and my belief. And of course, if I'm not welcome, then why am I here? And it made me question it all. And I just thought, well, I thought I was loved by God, but maybe I'm not then. I mean, don't forget, this is the musings of a 16-year-old over 30 years ago. But that's the thing, isn't it? So it's interesting, isn't it? When I was 22 or so, I had the guts to go to a gay club where there were other people, and try to see if it was just me that was weirdo or whatever, or and try and find out a bit more about who I was and try and understand myself, as everyone does, really. And of course, that was quite welcoming, so I quite liked that. So I went to that. But I mean, it is for the church. I think you have to, if you're gonna. Surely any good Christian, and I hate to use sort of such terms because it sort of implies something, should be open and treat everyone equally. And I think that's what you should do. If someone's transgender, you just treat them like how they present, respect them, and how you would treat someone else. It's simple, isn't it, really?
Yeah, because at the bottom of it, we all want the people that we meet for the first time to be welcoming and say hello, how are you, and be non-judgmental. So is it really such a hardship to be the same back? Do we really need to judge the person in front of us on how we think that they should be?
No. And that's it, isn't it? But this comes back to that difficult thing where, as I talked about earlier, about when someone's gay and someone's transgender, two different things. Is that the whole gender thing is you try it, it's almost impossible to overcome, particularly if you're not sure of someone's gender. It becomes a major sort of thing in your head, it seems, doesn't it? And I think that's kind of part how we're culturally conditioned, aren't we? Living in the society that we do, that the most important thing about a person is what gender they are, isn't it? Yeah. Also,
yes,
it isn't, but I think the reality is that culturally it is, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. I'm sure we've all been in situations where we've looked at somebody across the room and had that conversation with a friend of ours. Is that boy or girl? And we always. Yeah. I think everyone's been there at some point in their life.
Yeah, I mean, it happened to me with a child at work, in the last year, and it confused me. And then I was desperately, frantically searching my notes, trying to work out to give me some kind of clue, because she was that ambiguous, is it? But I suppose, and that's the thing. And what made me think about that afterwards, that it didn't really change what I was asking her, but it was kind of like I just needed to get that out of my mind. So it just really got in the way of my thinking. So, and I think that's what must happen to people that haven't met transgender people before. And obviously I've met lots of transgender people, and I saw a transgender child today, and and I thought, okay, and I didn't make, the best thing to do is not to make how do you treat someone? Well, what you don't do is you keep staring at them and looking them up and down, do you? What you don't want to do is make them feel uncomfortable. So it's like you were talking about that deformity thing, Matthew, before, about it's hard not to notice, isn't it? But we live in what we hope is a civilized and perhaps for the most part a polite society, so we clock it, but we don't make an issue of it, do we? Or keep staring at if they've got a funny shaped nose or something, or particularly big ears, And I suppose it's the thing with people who are transgender, isn't it? You just want them to feel at ease. And I suppose the thing is with it as well is that it doesn't mean just because someone's transgender that then it's a topic of conversation for you to have with them. Maybe some people think that, I don't know. I'm sure in my early days I had that, where it was, and whilst I'm happy to answer questions, it's not my daily life, it's not a topic of conversation, is it? I'm doing a special one tonight talking to you guys, but I think that's the thing, isn't it? You just treat them in the gender they present, and as someone you would treat someone in that gender. Yeah.
There's a thought I want to throw in, and I don't want this to take up the next 20 minutes because it very easily could. But I'd like to throw this in. It didn't come up on the show, and I'm sure this is a feature of the issue for Christians, is gay and transgender touches a behavior rather than just saying, it's one thing to look different, it's something else to act different. And to Christianity, free will is sacrosanct. And I think as soon as somebody says, I am this way, I can't change it, I am not behaving like this out of choice, I don't have a choice. As soon as you use that language, you're directly challenging the concept of free will. And that is absolutely sacrosanct to Christianity. And I think that creates a problem.
Yeah. So, sorry, I've just got my other half's coming, so I'm trying to keep him quiet.
Right. I was just waiting. Yeah, you've got to keep Andrew shut up because we'll go for the next 20 minutes if we let Andrew get a word in.
You think it'll only be 20?
It's all right. He's got the message. It's all right. It's okay. So what you're saying then is, if I say to someone, then I haven't got a choice. This is how I am, and this is why I act like I do. It challenges the notion of free will in that you can choose how you act, or what is that? What you mean?
Yes. Because to Christianity, it's very important that we have free will, and science is challenging the whole notion, the whole concept of behavioural free will. And Christians need to oppose that.
But don't generally we accept, I think, men and women behave differently. So there is that aspect of it, isn't it? If
that is true.
You're one gender and you're another gender, then you're the other gender. Let's leave the non-binary out of it for the moment. I'm sure someone will say you should have discussed that. But that's the reason for why you're acting like that. So. I suppose free will, I could try and act like a gender I'm not, couldn't I? So, to make them feel more comfortable. And I suppose, arguably, I've tried that when I was younger. Perhaps I'm not very good at acting. Maybe there's that. But yeah, well, I don't think the problem with this free will thing is just that I think you talked about this earlier, Matthew, when you said that, if someone's gay, that's how they are. If someone's transgender, that's how they are. It's not a choice, is it? Because it comes back to the free will implies there's some kind of choice, doesn't it? And I think most people, I would hope, would agree that some things are not really a choice, and you can't help it, can you? So does that answer it?
I think so.
Yeah. So I think people have to understand that there are some things I feel like I could choose to be. It's a bit like, well, let's compare then. A friend of mine says, Jane, is this it's a lifestyle choice? Well, no, being vegan's a lifestyle choice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So obvious sort of thing, isn't it?
But gender is not a choice. Gender is coded in our DNA. And gender is not as simple as XX or XY. I've said this over and over and over, and I'll keep saying this until every listener no longer needs to be reminded and they all get it. Our chromosome combinations are not simply XX and XY. We have other common combinations, XXY and XYY, just to name two. And so gender is not binary. And for those that think that it is, they have not only a wrong, but a wrong-headed and tragic misunderstanding of what gender is and of where it comes from. Because gender is not expressed by your gross anatomy. Gender is coded in your cells. And that only scratches the surface. And Matthew has forbidden me to carry this on. So
I think Matthew's got a good point to it because one of the things that was really apparent in the Jenny Ann Bishop, Peter Linus discussion was they got lost in all the chromosomes and all the biological thing. Well, you're born this sex, and well, that's why we have sex. And if gender's a social construct, surely then what you're constructing is a so, and all this stuff, and it kind of sort of goes off meandering down the road, doesn't it? With, well, there's 47 different ways you can have your XY chromosomes mixed up if you really try, and there's the intersex thing, and there's all this and all that. But really, the thing about all of that is that, Andrew, is that, well, apart from Matthew being right, don't go down that road, is because it doesn't. And this was the problem with the whole show with Jenny Ann and Peter, is that although if people didn't know that, they maybe learnt something new. It doesn't really tell them how does that help you deal with someone who's transgender? How does that help you interact, in a way that's respectful, helpful, and welcoming, which is, I guess, what the church should be, really, isn't it? Or what a good Christian should be if you're welcoming someone new into your flock, or if that's what they call it, or congregation. So, yeah, because it doesn't really add much to help people to know how to deal with it, which is exactly where that show really got lost, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is, because the moment we start fighting over chromosomes, we might as well be fighting over eye and hair color. And for those who think that we don't do that, there's this thing called racism, right?
Yes.
We do fight over things that don't and shouldn't matter.
Yeah, and the other thing to think about for people who haven't encountered many people that are transgender is that let's not forget. Let's say it's back to the old cliches again, isn't it? Where people kind of had this thing. Certainly, when I was growing up, about gay people, and it was always about gay men, wasn't it? It was never about women for some reason. A bit like transgender is always about trans women, not trans men, isn't it? For some reason, it's like, it's weird, isn't it? But the thing, let's think the gay man, was presented as, a bit like the Blue Oyster in Police Academy. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, everyone, you know what I mean, don't you?
Yep.
And this thing about being camp and all that kind of thing, whereas, I know plenty of gay men who really aren't. I know some that are, sure. But you got to, for the people who are at the church and thinking, well, we've got some transgender people coming to congregation, you're not really sure what you're going to get. It could be some trans man who's, comes riding on his Harley Davidson for a while. Now, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that there's a massive broad church here. And I think that one of the things that actually is problematic for the trans community, I think, is that they have to fit in. They feel almost like they have to fit into the stereotypes, so if you're a trans woman, you don't like cars or football or stuff like that, which I quite do, but and you should be doing feminine things and all that. But I think the thing is that as people grow, there are plenty of men and women who don't fall into those stereotypes, but I suppose the church is just entrenched in those gender roles, isn't it, really?
I'm a man who doesn't do football. Or soccer to our non-English listeners. The sport baffles me. It really does. And people talk about the games over the weekend in the coffee place at work, and I'm like, huh?
See, I quite like it, and I've got quite into it. So yeah, but there was stuff that I don't know. I mean, I do things that a lot of women at my job I do, a lot of women do. So I mean, it's there's stuff like that I suppose I fit it quite well. But I mean, I suppose that's the thing though, for thinking about people who haven't met people who are transgender. Well, there's just as much variety as there are people who aren't, of course. So, it doesn't define you entirely, and maybe that's the point.
As we start winding to a close. Mm-hmm. I've been thinking about this for quite a little while now, and I think I'll just offer a small part of that of this experiment that I've been contemplating right here. I've been wondering about why it is that Christianity is so divisive. Are we so different that we need to focus on things like the LGBTQI plus community, or should we really not try to look at this another way? And here's how I would suggest that we look at it. I would not steal from either one of you. And I am absolutely positive that neither of you would steal from me. Matthew
Careful.
has. Well, okay, look, I know you're trying to replace your Windows computer, but you can't have my Mac.
You can't have mine either.
And I will say that I've got a little. I've got two stepdaughters, and we've got a child on the way. Matthew's got a daughter. I feel absolutely certain that I could leave my children in either of one of you's care, and they would be safe. I feel certain that we could go out in public, and if I were about to step out in traffic, neither of you would let me. And we could go on like this for hours. We could talk about the things that we wouldn't do to each other. And it wouldn't matter if none of us ever brought up the word God. We wouldn't actually care how either of the three of us made those ethical decisions, right? We would only care that those were commitments that we would make to each other, regardless of the foundation for the reason that we made those commitments. And it seems to me, at this point, if you've got a God who is so trivial as to care about how I identify from a gender perspective, or what my sexual preferences are for consenting adults. So let me say that again for the listeners, for consenting adults, then I actually don't want to have anything to do with that God. What should the church do? How should the church include the transgender community or any other community? By focusing on the things that I know we all share, and by not taking peripheral issues and magnifying them as if they are of central importance. That is how the church should approach every single thing it does. And if you can't do that, then you need to reconsider what's at the core of your humanity. And that's my closing thought.
Thank you, Andrew. What I thought. I want to throw a question in first before I give my closing thought. You both know that I do a bit of amateur dramatics and stage treading in my free time out of work, and it's usually comedies, and they touch on all sorts of subjects. A couple of years ago, a script that we had, it was a script from the 1970s, and it referred to the play was set around a cricket match, and it referred to a character who was never on stage. It was an opposing team, cricket team. So this character was a fictional character, never on stage. But this character was referred to in one line of dialogue as Blackie. So we decided that was too racist, and so we cut that line, and we just said that one over there. We completely cut out that line. In the play that we're rehearsing now, one of the other characters is called Fatty, and it's part of the joke. And we're leaving that in, and by chance the actor's playing it is on the larger side anyway, and we're just making a huge joke out of it. Could transgender or homosexuality ever be considered funny enough to be used like the fatty, or will it always be like race in that it will be too uncomfortable to go to?
Your closing thoughts come up with a difficult question there, Matthew.
I know.
I mean, the problem is with all of this is that, not necessarily a problem, is it? But I'm thinking that it's okay if the person is okay with it, and the feeling with the audience is okay with it. Because we'd never use, you're right, we'd never use a racist term. It's just unthinkable, isn't it? And whereas something about someone's size, I don't know. I think there's a part of me that wants to say that I don't think we should. I think it's very painful, isn't it, for those to laugh about, what a critical situation it can be. A matter of life or death, as I said earlier. So I don't. There's a part of me wants to say I don't think that's okay. And the trouble is that jokes about people that are being gay, I think, have gone past being acceptable now. So I think it does. Maybe it should err towards more of that side of that. We wouldn't do that, say a term because it's racist, and maybe it's the same. Well, what do you think?
I don't know the answer. I haven't got an answer. It was just going through my mind. And
Yeah,
I guess where I was going, my mind is when something is an accepted norm, then it becomes safe to laugh about. And I'm saying about rather than at, because that's what I mean.
No, I understand, and I'm just trying to think in my head at the moment that I've got a gay friend who's one of my very best friends, and would we joke about stuff? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I think it's all right in the right company, isn't it?
Yeah, so when it's a private company, it's different. But I'm trying to think on stage, and yeah, maybe it will be like race in that it will always be considered too sensitive. I guess I'm okay with that. Maybe somebody will be clever enough to write a good joke involving transgender or homosexuality, which isn't mocking of them, but is a genuinely funny joke. And I look forward to that day.
The topics I want you to. I know we've got to close, and I probably need to go to bed soon. But I think the thing with humour is that it does generally reinforce prejudices. There is that problem, isn't there? So it's a difficult one. But yeah, if someone comes up with a really good joke, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was the thought that was just going through mind. So I thought I'd throw that back. Yeah, but my closing thoughts though are. In terms of the subject, how should the church respond? Respond like other people would, take your Christianity out of the equation. I know Christianity is precious and special to Christians, and to many Christians, maybe even all Christians, their Christianity is the label that they hold. It's their defining characteristic, and I'm not trying to deny that. But when acting or behaving around people, when trying to make yourself as a person, as an attractive person to other people who you don't quite understand or you're feeling uncomfortable with, be yourself and be the best person to them that you can possibly be. I don't think I could say anything more than that. Give them a good impression of yourself in the same way that you would like them to give you a good impression of themselves, and then see what happens. I guess I'm saying don't be a dick. Yeah,
or treat people how you'd like to be treated. I think it's one of the commandments, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Unless you happen to be part of the LGBTQI plus community, and then apparently,
or of a different colour, or of a,
or if you happen to, oh no, never mind. No. So Jane, thanks for joining us on this show, and as is appropriate for any podcast of this kind, if you could leave the listeners with closing thoughts, not only about how the church should engage with the transgender community, but something that you'd like for all of us to know, because I've spent some time going after Christianity here, but it's not just Christianity that has this problem, right? Atheists can have this problem. Islam has this problem. Jews can have this kind of problem. What do you want us all to know? Because this is about learning from each other.
I think you're right, of course. It's not just about Christians and the church can't deal with people that are transgender. I mean, I think there are a lot of people that seem to have huge issues, and in my experience, I don't go around telling people I'm transgender, do I? But and people don't ask. But sometimes, if I feel confident with somebody or I think they're going to be a really good friend, then I'll talk about it. But I think that my closing thoughts, which I didn't realise, I didn't know I was doing that, but that's fine. I'm trying to think.
Oh, every good podcast puts somebody on the spot.
Damn, put me on the spot there, Andrew. It's shocking. Well, I would say that it's not just about everybody can be. We're all ignorant, aren't we? And I think and it's not meant to be. I don't mean to offend people by saying that. I'm sure I'm ignorant of things. Yeah. But it's about having an open mind, isn't it? And realising that I'm a person. I work in society. I'm a social worker. I work professionally. I work with children. I help them. I keep them safe. I do lots of things like that. So I contribute, and just like someone who isn't transgender does. Yeah. So I would say don't define someone by that. As you would with someone who isn't. You would define them by the person they are. Oh, they're really good at soccer. Yeah. Or driving or stuff, or whatever it is, or they're really good artists. It's not they're transgendered and then they're an artist. So I would say try and look beyond that and see the person who's in there, respect them and respect who they are, because they'll do the same to you. And I think that's all I would ask, really, and get to know that person. And like we were saying earlier, I think that I don't go around expecting everyone to like me. In fact, I don't really care. But, there are people we hit it off with and people we don't. And I think that just because someone's transgender, you shouldn't let that get in the way of getting to know someone. And in fact, you'll probably learn something from it if you just take an open mind to it. And it's not all about sex. It's not all about. It's just about being yourself and being able to live your life, really, because that's all any of us want to do, I think.
Absolutely. If you ever want to come back to Still Unbelievable, you have an open invitation to join us anytime you'd like.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun, actually. More fun than I thought it would be.
I'm glad you've enjoyed it. It's one of the things that you never know about podcasting until you do it. Will you like it or won't you?
It's cheaper than track days.
yeah, true. Yes, but not race. Yes, cheaper than racing as well, which I've got doing as well. But yes, I know you're right there.
Matthew, thank you for coming over to Still Unbelievable. You and I have done these before, but we will do another of them. And
always a pleasure to be this side of our show catalogue.
Yeah. Matthew and I do Ask an Atheist Anything together, Jane, and okay. Matthew does a lot more of the heavy lifting over there. Although I'm planning on dropping Still Unbelievable on him too.
Careful. I can't do all the acting and this at the same time.
It's funny, actually, because I know Matthew a long time, and I think that I remember when he was a believer and all that, and to be fair, you did get a hard time, didn't you, at times?
Possibly rightly so
we
as well.
We even at a circuit after you, and that's right, didn't we? Because it was
right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, there was Andrew. Yeah, there's a corner. Does that corner still exist anymore? It doesn't, does it?
Yeah, it's still called Church.
It's still called, there's a corner called Church, and this group of friends that we know renamed it after me in honour.
Oh, yes. Right.
We still fondly think of it like that when we go around there. And I will be competing there again this year, so I should think. Yeah.
You know what? I don't even think I've driven the redesigned circuit. That's how long it has been since I've actively done a track day. That's shameful, isn't it?
2005. Yeah, it was about 2005.
Oh, that's disgraceful. I need to fix that.
I think you're seriously slacking.
I am. It's because I sold my rally car. That's why.
I know.
Matthew, let me throw a couple
How
of
could you?
closing notes on this episode, and then we'll continue on. Folks, thank you for listening to this episode of Still Unbelievable. I hope that it has been as enriching for every one of you listening as it has been for me. Jane and Matthew, thank you again. And if you want to get in touch with us, if you would like to voice your agreement or voice your disagreement, or if you have a question that you'd like for us to address in a future episode, we encourage you to get in touch with us. You can email us at the moment at stillunbelievablepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that is stillunbelievablepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you again, and we look forward to being with you the next time.